Stormer Show is live once again. Trying to get my camera set up here before we dive in. Okay. Today's stream should follow the normal format. I will have a recap of what I read in Sapiens and our chapter today of Dorian. Yeah, my piano, it did come with me. It's there. Still sealed in the box. I'm waiting to remove it. Hard to say how or why. I guess I know why. It's because it's hard to say when I'll move. And it's more convenient to keep it in its box during transport. Plus the piano takes up a bunch of space. Yeah. I think it might be a good idea for me to practice, if nothing else, to try to remember the songs that I learned how to play. Adventure Time and Hedwig's Theme I learned how to play. And I think playing piano, it's not really like riding a bike. Like playing any instrument, it's like the more often you play, the better it is that you'll be. That's why Mr. Hoffman, some piano teachers will tell you, it's like you've got to play every day. Sorry, I'm trying to find like a perfect spot there. That's probably the best. It's like you've got to play every single day. Because by playing every single day, you'll make yourself more familiar with different notes, different keys. Over time, you'll be able to put different patterns together. And the more time that you give between practice sessions, the longer the break that you take from playing or from practicing, the more likely it is that those connections, those neurons in your brain, the link between them will weaken, fade, and break over time. Okay. So if you would like to see a good old-fashioned Stormer Show piano practice session, just let me know in the chat. Just be like, hey, Stormer, can you play some songs on piano? And I'll be like, sure. But yeah, I have to set up the piano first, so yeah. I gotta get a refill and go to the bathroom. I might do that before I actually dive into Dorian today. Man, a lot of interesting concepts. Yeah, I think maybe just chatting is a good place for me to talk about some of the things that are going on, like the hurricane, Afghanistan, what's going on in the world. There's beauty in art, and they say that art simulates life. So maybe we will see some parallels in the things that we look into. Okay, thank you, Mitchell. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate your comment. Appreciate the positive vibes. I did TikTok today, and the only thing I said in my TikTok, it's also in Stormer Show, was Gloomy Sunday, a tribute to the late Billie Holiday. So yeah, that positive energy is well received. Thank you, Mitchell. But anyway, I'll give the recap that I was going to of Sapiens. I'll take a quick break and then I'll dive into the reading for today. And like I said, if you'd like to hear piano, just let me know and I'll work it into today's stream schedule. Today in Sapiens, Yuval discusses the Gilgamesh Project. And I'll paraphrase a little bit, it's based on the story of Gilgamesh, the, I believe, greatest warrior that's ever existed. And he wins in all of his battles. He sees his friend die, and he studies his friend's corpse. It's been dead for a few days. He sees a worm coming out of one of its nostrils, this dead body. And he's like, a strange fear grips him. He's like, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm the best, and the best should always live. Well, that put him on a quest to try to find the like fountain of youth type thing. It's like the quest for immortality, eternal life. And he didn't find it. I believe, he searched far and wide, but he didn't actually find it. But in the book, Sapiens, Yuval likens this anecdote to humanity's modern approach to death and mortality. And it's not, life expectancy is not as low as it used to be. Over time, the length of life has increased. Yeah, death is not the end. I was gonna show you guys a clip. It's a little bit easier to show clips and stuff when you're using a PC setup, I think, through OBS. I have to keep trying to learn more about it. I'm mainly just using my phone as a camera because it's the most convenient solution for now. But yeah, I can show you guys the video that I was thinking of when I was looking at, when I was reading through this. It's like, as a result, people are living an extremely long period of time. We've an extremely good understanding today, especially in comparison to times past, about the human body. He draws attention to stuff like infections, like gangrenous infections, and how even just like 100 years ago, doctors would amputate limbs to prevent infection from spreading to the body. Well, even today, it's like if you look at different diseases like cancer, it can be combated with radiation. Like practically any health-related condition you could think of, like heart disease, diet and exercise, as well as medicines, can help remedy the condition. And youth mortality is dramatically reduced today than it was back then too. It was much more common in, for example, the 19th century for a child to die when they're young than it is today in comparison. Today it's far less common. And my prediction is that it's going to have an impact on climate change. I'll have to wait and see what happens. But If I can't find it right away, I'll just take my break. It's like, yeah, it's a Hey Arnold episode, and, oh my gosh, there it is. Okay, yeah. Kinda creepy, guys. Take a look. And it's like, what it comes from is, I don't really remember the episode very well, but Arnold's thinking about his own future, and his grandpa is still alive in that future, and that's how he imagines his grandpa in this future, because his grandpa is old, as we know, when the show happens in the 90s. So it's like he was already old, and so it's like when it goes into like 20, like the current year, it's like 30 years down the line, like that's how he would look. Like his tissues are decaying, he's getting older. And I can't help but think of that when I think of the Gilgamesh Project. It's like we're gonna see a lot more of that, I think. A lot more people living past 100, people living to like 110, 120, 130. Yeah. Like it might get to the point where it's extremely difficult to die of natural causes because of medical advances. What kind of implications does that carry? You know, just something to think about, guys. Whew. But yeah, I'm gonna get a quick drink, and I'll be right back, and we'll dive right in to Sapiens for today. Stay tuned. Okay, I'm back. Okay. Let me see if I can level out my camera. Come on. Alright, there. Okie dokie. Last time we left out, it was chapter 14. Today we are on chapter 15. My shirt. That's another thing. In this place, storage. Oh man, I'm hoping for a stroke of good luck soon. Good fortune. Lady luck, please smile on me. Chapter 14, anyways. Dorian asks his friend Campbell, Alan Campbell, a medical doctor, I believe, to help him dispose of Basil Hallward's body. Yeah, and he ends up blackmailing Alan because, as we might recall, he is not reluctant to go along with this. He doesn't want anything to do with this murder cover-up. And based on what we see in the book, Dorian blackmails Alan in order to get him to dispose of the body, essentially, and that's exactly where the last chapter ended off. Alright. In lieu of music, I may have a just chatting afterward, just to talk about things I've seen and my opinions in lieu of music, but yeah, I'll have to wait and see. Okay. Chapter 15. That evening at 8:30, exquisitely dressed and wearing a large buttonhole of Parma violets. Those are heavy scented blossoms. Excuse me. Heavy scented blooms of a pale lavender color. Dorian Gray was ushered into Lady Narborough's drawing room by bowing servants. His forehead was throbbing with maddened nerves, and he felt wildly excited, but his manner as he bent over his hostess's hand was as easy and graceful as ever. Perhaps one never seems so much at one's ease as when one has to play a part. Certainly no one looking at Dorian Gray that night could have believed that he had passed through a tragedy as horrible as any tragedy of our age. It's like you can't always see what people have been through. Yeah, some people do a very good job of concealing their scars. Hiding their traumas and whatnot. I might be one of those. It's hard to tell what I've been through just by looking at me. Okay, but Dorian, that's the case with Dorian at this looks like social event. Yeah, at this social event, Dorian's giving off the air that the horrible event that he was a part of, he wasn't a part of. Okay. Those finely shaped fingers could never have clutched a knife for sin, nor those smiling lips have cried out on God and goodness. He himself could not help wondering at the calm of his demeanor, and for a moment felt keenly the terrible pleasure of a double life. It's like he doesn't feel remorse. He doesn't feel bad about what he did. Yeah, he doesn't feel bad about what he did. And I'm wondering if he's even feeling proud. Like, I got away with it. It was a small party, got up rather in a hurry by Lady Narborough, who was a very clever woman, with what Lord Henry used to describe as the remains of really remarkable ugliness. She had proved an excellent wife to one of our most tedious ambassadors, and having buried her husband properly in a marble mausoleum, which she had herself designed, and married off her daughters to some rich, rather elderly men, she devoted herself now to the pleasures of French fiction, French cookery, and French esprit, when she could get it. Those are heavy scented blossoms. Wait, did I really already read that? Oh yeah, sorry, there's not. I thought there was a star there next to the word esprit, but there was not. Dorian was one of her special favorites, and she always told him she was extremely glad that she had not met him in early life, because they could have gotten into some stuff. I know, my dear, I should have fallen madly in love with you. It's like, if you only knew me in my 20s. She used to say, and thrown my bonnet right over the mills for your sake. It is most fortunate that you were not thought of at that time. As it was, our bonnets were so unbecoming, and the mills were so occupied in trying to raise the wind that I never even had a flirtation with anybody. Mills or throwing one's hat over the windmills means to act recklessly. However, that was all Narborough's fault. He was dreadfully short-sighted, and there is no pleasure in taking in a husband who never sees anything. It's like vision. Her guests this evening were rather tedious. The fact was, as she explained to Dorian behind a very shabby fan, one of her married daughters had come up quite suddenly to stay with her, and to make matters worse, had actually brought her husband with her. "I think it is most unkind of her, my dear," she whispered. "Of course I go and stay with them every summer after I come from Hamburg. Hamburg is a fashionable German spa. But then an old woman like me must have fresh air sometimes, and besides, I really wake them up. You don't know what an existence they lead down there. It is pure, unadulterated country life. They get up early They get up early because they have so much to do, and go to bed early because they have so little to think about. It's like they don't suffer from insomnia with all these thoughts racing through their head. There has not been a scandal in the neighborhood since the time of Queen Elizabeth, and consequently they all fall asleep after dinner. You shan't sit next either of them. You shall sit by me and amuse me." Dorian murmured a graceful compliment and looked around the room. Yes, it certainly was a tedious party. Aren't they all? Two of the people he had never seen before, and the others consisted of Ernest Harrowden, one of those middle-aged mediocrities so common in London clubs who have no enemies, but are thoroughly disliked by their friends. Lady Ruxton, an overdressed woman of 47 with a hooked nose, who was always trying to get herself compromised, but was so peculiarly plain that to her great disappointment no one would ever believe anything against her. Mrs. Erline, a pushing nobody with a delightful lisp and Venetian red hair. Lady Alice Chapman, his hostess's daughter, a dowdy, dull girl, with one of those characteristic British faces that once seen are never remembered, and her husband, a red-cheeked, white-whiskered creature who, like so many of his class, was under the impression that inordinate joviality can atone for an entire lack of ideas. It's like just be in a great mood and laugh all the time. Ha 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 ha, yes, of course. Yes, I think you're right. Oh, and what would you say? Ah ha ha, yes. Absolutely marvelous. Like, he's in such a great mood that he doesn't have to have any clever remarks or muse on different philosophical ideas. Yeah, I don't know. Hard for me to think of an example. Think of the life of the party. He was rather sorry he had come, till Lady Narborough, looking at the great ormolu gilt clock that sprawled in gaudy curves on the mauve-draped mantel-shelf, exclaimed, "How horrid of Henry Wotton to be so late. I sent round to him this morning on chance, and he promised faithfully not to disappoint me. We haven't seen Lord Henry in a while. Ormelu's gilded bronze or brass." It was some consolation that Harry was to be there. And when the door opened and he heard his slow musical voice lending charm to some insincere apology, he ceased to feel bored. But at dinner he could not eat anything. Plate after plate went away untasted. Lady Narborough kept scolding him for what she called an insult to poor Adolphe, who invented the menu especially for you. And now and then Lord Henry looked across at him, wondering at his silence and abstracted manner. From time to time the butler filled his glass with champagne. He drank eagerly, and his thirst seemed to increase. Lord Henry and Dorian have up until now had a pretty close relationship, and over time I think they've grown more and more apart. Even still, I think Lord Henry can pick up on the fact that something's happened with Dorian. Dorian, said Lord Henry at last, as the chaudfroid was being handed round, what is the matter with you tonight? You were quite out of sorts. Like he can at least identify that Dorian's not quite acting normal. He's not quite himself. Chaudfroid is a dish of meats or fish covered in a jellied sauce. Like he's not eating anything. I believe he's in love, cried Lady Narborough. And that he's afraid to tell me for fear I should be jealous. He's quite right, I certainly should. Dear Lady Narborough, murmured Dorian, smiling, I have not been in love for a whole week. Not, in fact, since Madame de Ferrol left town. Sadly, he doesn't mention Sybil. How you men can fall in love with that woman, exclaimed the old lady. I really cannot understand it. It's simply because she remembered you when you were a little girl, Lady Narborough, said Lord Henry. She is the one link between us and your short frocks. She does not remember my short frocks at all, Lord Henry. But I remember her very well at Vienna 30 years ago, and how décolleté she was then. Décolleté is having a low-cut neckline. The reference here implies that she has questionable propriety or taste. Yeah, I guess she's showing cleavage or something. She is still décolleté, he answered, taking an olive in his long fingers. When she's in a very smart gown, she looks like an edition de luxe of a bad French novel. She is really wonderful and full of surprises. Her capacity for family affection is extraordinary. When her third husband died, her hair turned quite gold from grief. Third husband implies that she's a pretty hot ticket. But she's... yeah. Might struggle with commitment. Or, you know, yeah, it might just be that she's a hot ticket. Every guy wants to get with her, and she can't turn away all their advances. Marriage just doesn't work for some people. Okay. Grief. Wilde recycles this quip in his 1895 play The Importance of Being Earnest. How can you, Harry? Cried Dorian. It is a most romantic explanation, laughed the hostess, but her third husband, Lord Henry. You don't mean to say that Farrell's the fourth? Certainly, Lady Narborough. I don't believe a word of it. Well, ask Mr. Gray. He's one of her most intimate friends. Is it true, Mr. Gray? She assures me so, Lady Narborough, said Dorian. I asked her whether, like Marguerite de Navarre, that's a French queen, wife of Henry IV, infamous for her licentiousness. She had their hearts embalmed and hung at her girdle. She told me she didn't, because none of them had any hearts at all. 4 husbands, upon my word, that is trop de zèle. That means too zealous in French. Trop de audace, I tell her, said Dorian. Too bold. Oh, she's audacious enough for anything, my dear. And what is Farrell like? I don't know him. The husbands of very beautiful women belong to the criminal classes, said Lord Henry, sipping his wine. I guess you gotta be a bad boy to get with the most beautiful. It's like Tony, it's like Tony from Scarface. Oh wait. It's like Al Pacino's character from Scarface. Yeah, okay, let's move on. Lady Narborough hit him with her fan. Lord Henry, I am not at all surprised that the world says that you are extremely wicked. But what world says that? Asked Lord Henry, elevating his eyebrows. At this point in the novel, I think Lord Henry's the nicest guy. Women want to get with him. At least they should. It can only be the next world. This world and I are on excellent terms. Everybody, I know you Everybody I know says that you are very wicked, cried the old lady, shaking her head. Excuse me. Lord Henry looked serious for some moments. "It's perfectly monstrous," he said at last. "The way people go about nowadays saying things against one behind one's back. They're absolutely and entirely true." "Isn't he incorrigible?" cried Dorian, leaning forward in his chair. "I hope so," said his hostess, laughing. "But really, if you all worship Madame de Tourelle in this ridiculous way, I shall have to marry again so as to be in the fashion." She's like, "I'm going to have to marry a few more times to catch up with her." "You will never marry again, Lady Narborough," broke in Lord Henry. "You are far too happy. Plus, I think I don't know. I mean, I think it's okay to joke about it, but I don't think there's anything... I don't think it's a good reflection to be married multiple times." Like, I think it's a much better reflection to be married once. I mean, I think that's pretty much the point of marriage, right? "You were too happy. When a woman marries again, it's because she detested her first husband." I would agree. "When a man marries again, it's because he adored his first wife." "Women try their luck. Men risk theirs." Another astute observation by Lord Henry. Yeah. "Narborough wasn't perfect," cried the old lady. "If he had been, you would not have loved him, my dear lady," was the rejoinder. "Women love us for our defects. If we have enough of them, they will forgive us everything, even our intellects. You'll never ask me to dinner again. After saying this, I'm afraid, Lady Narborough. But it is quite true." "Of course it's true, Lord Henry. If we women do not love you for your defects, where would you all be? Not one of you would ever be married." It's like you gotta see past... Yeah, it's like you gotta see past some of the rough edges to get to the sweet interior. My sign is Cancer, and that's kind of how... that's another good way to describe it. It's like... you gotta crack the crab shell to get to the sweet meat inside. And sometimes that hard shell takes the form of those so-called defects. Like, yeah, a lot of messages or whatever else you perceive as a defect. Even looks themselves could be considered a defect. Anything that's not a perk, I guess. Anything that's not a plus. Let's see here. "You would be a set of unfortunate bachelors. Not, however, that would alter you much. Nowadays, all the married men live like bachelors, and all the bachelors like married men." A lot of it has to do with standards, too. It's like the way people are. It's like sometimes they think the grass is greener on the other side. It's like the single life makes guys more easygoing. The married life makes guys more adventurous. I think women are probably the same way to some extent. It's like you want to bone anybody but the person you're married to. "Fin de siècle," murmured Lord Henry. "Fin de globe," answered his hostess. Fin de siècle is French for end of the century. That's the general term for the 1890s. Fin de globe translates as end of the world. "I wish it were fin de globe," answered Dorian with a sigh. "Life is a great disappointment." Big true, Dorian. Wow. Kid comes out swinging with big fact. "Ah, my dear," cried Lady Narborough, putting on her gloves. "Don't tell me that you've exhausted life. When a man says that, one knows that life has exhausted him. Lord Henry is very wicked, and I sometimes wish that I had been. But you are made to be good. You look so good. I must find you a nice wife. Lord Henry, don't you think that Mr. Grey should get married?" I feel like whenever women say that about a guy, he's always like, I think I want to hold on to my independence for at least another year or two. It's like they're pushing him to commit. "I'm always telling him so, Lady Narborough," said Lord Henry with a bow. "But he's got baggage at this point in the novel. He's not just a pretty face. Well, we must look out for a suitable match for him. I shall go through Debrett carefully tonight and draw out a list of all the eligible young ladies. Delbert's Peerage, a guide to British aristocracy." Wow, Lord Henry, that's really nice of you. It's like, yes, go. Fetch me a spouse. The most fair. With their ages, Lady Narborough asked Dorian. "Of course, with their ages slightly edited, but nothing must be done in a hurry. I want it to be what the Morning Post calls a suitable alliance. Excuse me. And I want you both to be happy." "What nonsense people talk about happy marriages," exclaimed Lord Henry. "The true cynic." I don't think there was ever a character more cynical than Lord Henry. He's like, "A happy marriage, poppycock. A man can be happy with any woman, as long as he does not love her." Again, Lord Henry spitting truth. "What a cynic you are," cried the old lady, pushing back her chair and nodding to Lady Ruxton, like even she has to remark. "You must come and dine with me soon again. You are really an admirable tonic, much better than what Sir Andrew prescribes for me. You must tell me what people you would like to meet, though. I want it to be a delightful gathering. I like men who have a future and women who have a past." Reminds me of a Drake song. Little attitude problem, all good, will make stuff last. What song is that? Proud, I think, Proud of You. It's a collaboration with Nicki Minaj. He answered, "Or do you think it would make it a petticoat party?" "I fear so," she said, laughing as she stood up. "1,000 pardons, my dear Lady Ruxton," she added. "I didn't see that you had finished your cigarette." "Never mind, Lady Narborough. I spoke a great deal too much. I'm going to limit myself for the future." "Pray don't, Lady Ruxton," said Lord Henry. "Moderation is a fatal thing. Enough is as bad as a meal. More than enough is as good as a feast." Lady Ruxton glanced at him curiously. "You must come explain that to me some afternoon, Lord Henry. It sounds a fascinating theory," she murmured as she swept out of the room. "I'm telling you, Lord Henry can teach you a thing or two." "Now mind you don't stay too long over your politics and scandal," cried Lady Narborough from the door. "If you do, we are sure to squabble upstairs." The men laughed, and Mr. Chapman got up solemnly from the foot of the table and came up to the top. Dorian Gray changed his seat and went and sat by Lord Henry. Mr. Chapman began to talk in a loud voice about the situation in the House of Commons. He guffawed at his adversaries. The word doctrinaire is a word full of terror to the British mind. Reappeared from time to time between his explosions. An alliterative prefix served as an ornament of oratory. He hoisted the Union Jack on the pinnacles of thought. The inherited stupidity of the race, sound English common sense, he jovially termed it. Was shown to be the proper bulwark of society. Something strange about the way the words are arranged in that previous sentence. I guess stupidity is a shield is how I could paraphrase it. Ignorance as an armor. A smile curved Lord Henry's lips, and he turned around and looked at Dorian. "Are you better, my dear fellow?" he asked. "You seemed rather out of sorts at dinner." "I'm quite well, Harry. I'm tired, that's all." "You were charming last night. The little Duchess is quite devoted to you. She tells me that she's going down to Selby. She's promised to come on the 20th. Is Monmouth to be there too?" "Oh yes, Harry. He bores me dreadfully, almost as much as he bores her. She's very clever, too clever for a woman. She lacks the indefinable charm of weakness. It is the feet of clay that make the gold of image precious." Wilde later claimed to have been thinking of Lord Alfred Douglas when he conceived this idea. Her feet are very pretty, but they are not feet of clay. White porcelain feet, if you like. Yeah, I never understood foot fetishes. It's rooted in Chinese culture too. Foot binding is something that you can look into if you've got the time. Yeah. Unfortunately, it happened to me with my Chuck Taylors. From then on, I wear only wide-toed shoes. Okay, where am I? They had been through the fire, and when fire does not destroy, it hardens. When fire does not destroy, it hardens. She's had experiences. "How long has she been married?" asked Dorian. "An eternity, she tells me." "I believe, according to the peerage, it is 10 years. But 10 years with Monmouth must have been like eternity with time thrown in. Who else is coming?" "Oh, the Willoughbys, Lord Rugby and his wife, our hostess Geoffrey Clouston, the usual set. I have asked Lord Geotrain." "I like him," said Lord Henry. "A great many people don't, but I find him charming. He atones for being occasionally somewhat overdressed by always being absolutely overeducated. It's like he's got a wit to match. He's a very modern type. I don't know if he will come. I don't know if he'll be able to come, Harry. He may have to go to Monte Carlo with his father. Ah, what a nuisance people are. Yeah, socialites. Sometimes they get on one's nerves. Try and make him come. By the way, Dorian, you ran off very early last night. You left before 11. What did you do afterward? Did you go straight home? Sorry, light. I have to see what I'm reading to read. Dorian glanced at him hurriedly and frowned. "No, Harry," he said at last. "I did not get home till nearly 3. Did you go to the club?" "Yes," he answered. Then he bit his lip. "No, I don't think I meant that. I don't mean that. I didn't go to the club. I walked about. I forget what I did." "How inquisitive you are, Harry. You always want to know what one has been doing." It's like he has to keep his story straight. I always forget what I've been doing. I came in 2:30, if you wish to know the exact time. I had left my latchkey at home, and my servant had let me in. If you want any corroborative evidence on the subject, you can ask him." Lord Henry shrugged his shoulders. "My dear fellow, as if I cared. Let us go to the drawing room. No cherry. Cherry brandy, thank you. Mr. Chapman, something has happened to you, Dorian. Tell me what it is. You're not yourself tonight." Let's see if he tells the truth. I'm of the belief that he's going to cover it up. "Don't mind me, Harry. I'm irritable and out of temper. I shall come round and see you tomorrow or next day. Make my excuses to Lady Narborough. I shan't go upstairs. I shall go home. I must go home." "All right, Dorian. I dare say I shall see you tomorrow at tea time. The Duchess is coming." "I'll try to be there, Harry," he said, leaving the room. As Dorian Gray drove back to his own house, he was conscious that the sense of terror he thought he had strangled had come back to him.
Lord Henry's casual questioning had made him lose his nerve for the moment, and he wanted his nerve still. Things that were dangerous had to be destroyed. He winced. He hated the idea of even touching them. Yet it had to be done. He realized that, and when he had locked the door of his library, he opened the secret press into which he had thrust Basil Hallward's coat and bag. A huge fire was blazing. He piled another log on it. The smell of the singeing clothes and burning leather was horrible. It took him 3/4 of an hour to consume everything. At the end, he felt faint and sick, and having lit some Algerian pastilles, those are small, incense-like lozenges burned for their fragrance, in a pierced copper brazier, he bathed his hands and forehead with a cool musk-scented vinegar. Suddenly he started. His eyes grew strangely bright, and he gnawed nervously at his underlip. Between two of the windows stood a large Florentine cabinet made out of the ebony and inlaid with ivory and blue lapis. He watched it as though it were a thing that could fascinate and make afraid, as though it held something that he longed for and yet almost loathed. It's like he wants it, but he hates it. Some relationships are like this. His breath quickened. A mad craving came over him. He lit a cigarette and then threw it away. His eyelids drooped till the long fringed lashes almost touched his cheek. But he still watched the cabinet. At last he got up from the sofa on which he had been lying, went over to it, and having unlocked it, touched some hidden spring. A triangular drawer passed slowly out. His fingers moved instinctively toward it, dipped in, and closed on something. It was a small Chinese box of black and gold dust lacquer, elaborately wrought, the sides patterned with curved waves, and the silken cords hung round crystals and tasseled with plaited metal threads. He opened it. Inside was a green paste, waxy in luster, the odor curiously heavy and persistent. It's like he's still trying to destroy the evidence. Wild scholar H. Montgomery Hyde suggests this may be a poison or aphrodisiac. He hesitated for some moments with a strangely immobile smile upon his face. Then, shivering, though the atmosphere of the room was terribly hot, he drew himself up and glanced at the clock. It was 20 minutes to 12. He put the box back, shutting the cabinet doors as he did so, and went into his bedroom. As midnight was striking bronze blows upon the dusky air, Dorian Gray, dressed commonly and with a muffler wrapped around his throat, crept quietly out of his house. In Bond Street he found a hansom with a good horse. He hailed it and in a low voice gave the driver an address. The man shook his head. "It is too far for me," he murmured. "Here's a sovereign for you," said Dorian. "You will have another if you drive fast." "All right, sir," answered the man. "You'll be there in an hour." And after his fare got in, he turned the horse around and drove rapidly toward the river. Okay, chapter 15. Chapter 16 is pretty short. I think I will continue. Yeah, I think today and tomorrow I'll have a back-to-back. Man, sometimes messages pop up on my phone. It's like I don't catch them in time. Thoughts blow through my mind. Okay, chapter 16. After this chapter, I'll be wrapping up for today. I think if I do decide to play piano today, it'll probably be off stream. A cold rain began to fall, and the blurred street lamps looked ghastly in the dripping mist. The public houses were just closing, and dim men and women were clustering in broken groups around their doors. From some of the bars came the sound of horrible laughter. In others, drunkards brawled and screamed. Lying back in the hansom with his hat pulled over his forehead, Dorian Gray watched with listless eyes the sordid shame of the great city. And now and then he repeated to himself the words that Lord Henry had said to him on the first day they had met. To cure the soul by means of the senses, and the senses by means of the soul. Yes, that was the secret. He'd often tried it and would try it again now. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that quote from Fear and Loathing. It's like to become an animal when it gets rid of the pain of being a man. It's like just experience a lot of stuff. That'll breathe some life into you. Once the man lost his way, he had to drive back up half a mile. A steam rose from the horse as it splashed up the puddles. The side windows of the hansom were clogged with a gray flannel mist. To cure the soul by means of the senses, and the senses by means of the soul. How the words rang in the ears. His soul certainly was sick to death. Was it true that the senses could cure it? Innocent blood had been spilt. What could atone for that? For that there was no atonement, but through forgiveness was impossible. But though forgiveness was impossible, forgetfulness is possible still. Yeah, you can drink a lot. You can go to the police station and turn yourself in. Forgetfulness was possible still, and he was determined to forget, to stamp the thing out. To crush it as one would crush the adder that had stung one. Yes, but he's the villain. It's like he keeps on ignoring personal blame, personal responsibility. Indeed, what right had Basil to have spoken to him as he had done? Who had made him a judge over others? He had said things that were dreadful, horrible, and not to be endured. Yeah, I feel like sometimes people do this too, where it's like once you break up with someone or leave someone, it's like you conjure up as bad an image of that person as you can to make yourself feel better about the situation. Yeah, same thing here. It's like he kills the guy and then he tries to remember all the bad things that he can remember about him to feel better about the fact that he killed him when in reality he's the monster. On and on plodded the hansom, going slower, it seemed to him at each step. He thrust up the trap, that's the light carriage, and called to the man to drive faster. The hideous hunger for opium began to gnaw at him. His throat burned and his delicate hands twitched nervously together. He struck at the horse madly with his stick. The driver laughed and whipped up. He laughed in answer, and the man was silent. The way seemed interminable, and the streets like the black web of some sprawling spider. The monotony became unbearable, and as the mist thickened, he felt afraid. Then they passed by lonely brick fields. The fog was lighter here, and he could see the strange bottle-shaped kilns with their orange fan-like tongues of fire. A dog barked as they went by, and far away in the darkness some wandering seagull screamed. The horse stumbled in a rut, then swerved aside, and then broke into a gallop. After some time they left the clay road and rattled again over rough paven streets. Most of the windows were dark, but now and then fantastic shadows were silhouetted against some lamp-lit blind. He watched them curiously. They moved like monstrous marionettes, and made gestures like live things. He hated them. A dull rage was in his heart. As they turned a corner, a woman yelled something at them from an open door. The two men ran after the hansom for about 100 yards. The driver beat at them with his whip. It is sad. It is said that passion makes one think in a circle. Certainly with hideous iteration, the bitten lips of Dorian Gray shaped and reshaped those subtle words that dealt with soul and sense, till he had found in them the full expression, as it were, of his mood, and justified by intellectual approval passions that, without such justification, would have still dominated his temper. From cell to cell of his brain crept the one thought, and the wild desire to live. Most terrible of all man's appetites, quickened into force each trembling nerve and fiber. Ugliness that had once been hateful to him because it made things real, became dear to him now for that very reason. Ugliness was the one reality. The coarse brawl, the loathsome den, the crude violence of disordered life, the very vileness of thief and outcast were more vivid in their intense actuality of impression than all of the gracious shapes of art, the dreamy shadows of song. It's like he did something wrong, and then all of a sudden, when he's going through the night, everything that's negative, nasty, and ugly in the world is like getting magnified to him. It's like the opposite of rose-colored glasses. It's like brown-colored glasses. I feel like it's easier for guys to wear these than girls. That's just my presumption. You'll know you're wearing them when you think everything sucks all the time, and anything bad that happens, you pick it up right away. Yeah, it's a drag to wear those. I think it has more to. It's not just mindset. A lot of the time, it also has to do with experience. Wearing those. Okay, where am I? They were what he needed for forgetfulness. In 3 days he would be free. Suddenly the man drew up with a jerk at the top of a dark lane. Over the low roofs and jagged chimney stacks of the house rose the black masts of ships. Wreaths of white mist clung like ghostly sails to the yards. "Somewhere about here, sir, ain't it?" he asked huskily through the trap. Dorian started and peered round. "This'll do." Dorian gets out in the Chinese district in London. He answered, and having got out hastily and given the driver the extra fare that he had promised him, walked quickly toward the direction of the quay. Here and there a lantern gleamed at the stern of some huge merchantman. The light shook and splintered in the puddles. A red glare came from outbound steamer that was coaling. The slimy pavement looked like a wet mackintosh. He hurried on toward the left, glancing back now and then to see if he was being followed. In about 7 or 8 minutes, he reached a small shabby house that was wedged in between two gaunt factories. In one of the top windows stood a lamp. He stopped and gave a peculiar knock. After a little time, he heard steps in the passage and the chain being unhooked. The door opened quietly, and he went in without saying a word to the squat, misshapen figure that flattened itself into the shadow as he passed. At the end of the hall hung a tattered green curtain that swayed and shook. The gusty wind which had followed him in from the street. He dragged it aside and entered a long, low room which looked as if it had once been a third-rate dancing saloon. Shrill flaring gas jets, dulled and distorted in the fly-blown mirrors that faced them, were ranged round the walls. Greasy reflectors of ribbed tin backed them, making quivering discs of light. The floor was covered with ochre-colored sawdust, trampled here and there into the mud and stained with dark rings of spilt liquor. Some Malays were crouching by a little charcoal stove, playing with bone counters and showing their white teeth as they chattered. In one corner, with his head buried in his arms, a sailor sprawled over a table, and the tawdrily painted bar that ran across one complete side stood 2 haggard women mocking an old man who was brushing the sleeves of his coat with an expression of disgust. "He thinks he's got red ants on him," laughed one of them as Dorian passed by. The man looked at her in terror and began to whimper. At the end of the room there was a little staircase leading to a darkened chamber. As Dorian hurried up its 3 rickety steps, the heavy odor of opium met him. He heaved a deep breath, and his nostrils quivered with pleasure. When he entered, a young man with smooth yellow hair, who was bending over a lamp lighting a long thin pipe, looked up at him and nodded in a hesitating manner. "You here, Adrian?" muttered Dorian. "Where else should I be?" he answered listlessly. "None of the chaps will speak to me now." "I thought you'd left England." "Darlington is not going to do anything. My brother paid the bill at last." George doesn't speak to me either. I don't care, he added with a sigh. As long as one has this stuff, one doesn't want friends. I think I have too many friends. I think I've had too many. Dorian winced and looked around at the grotesque things that lay in such fantastic postures on the ragged mattresses. The twisted lens, the gaping mouths, the staring, lusterless eyes. And that scared me a little bit. Chris Hemsworth from a Marvel show. Okay, where am I? He knew in what strange heavens they were suffering and what dull hells were teaching them the secret of some new joy. They were better off than he was. He was prisoned in thought. Memory, like a horrible malady, was eating his soul away. From time to time, he seemed to see the eyes of Basil Hallward looking at him. Yet he felt he could not stay. The presence of Adrian Singleton troubled him. He wanted to be where no one would know who he was. He wanted to escape from himself. I'm going on to the other place, he said, after a pause. On the wharf? Yes. That mad cat is sure to be there. They won't have her in this place now. Dorian shrugged his shoulders. I'm sick of women who love one. Women who hate one are much more interesting. Besides, the stuff is better. Much the same. I like it better. Come and have something to drink. I must have something. I don't want anything, murmured the young man. Never mind. Adrian Singleton rose up wearily and followed Dorian to a bar. A half-caste in a rugged turban and a shabby ulster grinned a hideous greeting as he thrust a bottle of brandy and 2 tumblers in front of them. The woman sidled up and began to chatter. Dorian turned his back on them and said something in a low voice to Adrian Singleton. A crooked smile, like a Malay crease, writhed across the face of one of the women. We are very proud tonight, she sneered. For God's sake, don't talk to me, cried Dorian, stamping his foot on the ground. What do you want? Money? Here it is. Don't ever talk to me again. 2 red sparks flashed for a moment in the woman's sodden eyes, then flickered out, and left them dull and glazed. She tossed her head and raked the coins off the counter with greedy fingers. Her companion watched her enviously. It's no use, sighed Adrian Singleton. I don't care to go back. What does it matter? I am quite happy here. You will write to me if you want anything, won't you? Said Dorian after a pause. Perhaps. Good night, then. Good night, answered the young man, passing up the steps and wiping his parched mouth with a handkerchief. Dorian walked to the door with a look of pain in his face. As he drew the curtain aside, a hideous laugh broke from the painted lips of the woman who had taken his money. There goes the devil's bargain, she hiccuped in a hoarse voice. Curse you, he answered. Don't call me that. She snapped her fingers. Prince Charming is what you'd like to be called, ain't it? She yelled after him. The drowsy sailor leaped to his feet as she spoke and looked wildly around. The sound of the shutting of the hall door fell on his ear. He rushed out as if in pursuit. Dorian Gray hurried along the quay through the drizzling rain. His meeting with Adrian Singleton had strangely moved him, and he wondered if the ruin of the young life was really to be laid out at his door, as Basil Hallward had said to him with such infamy of insult. He bit his lip, and for a few seconds his eyes grew sad. Yet, after all, what did it matter to him? One's days were too brief to take the burden of another's errors on one's shoulders. Each man lived his own life and paid his own price for living it. The only pity was one had to pay so often for a single fault. One had to pay over and over again, indeed. In her dealings with man, destiny never closed her accounts. There are moments, psychologists tell us, when the passion for sin, or for what the world calls sin, so dominates a nature that every fiber of the body, as every cell of the brain, seems to be instinct with fearful impulses. Men and women at such moments lose the freedom of their will. They move to their terrible end as automatons move. Choice is taken from them, and conscience is either killed, or, if it lives at all, lives but to give rebellion its fascination and disobedience its charm. For all sins, as theologians weary now of reminding us, are sins of disobedience. When the high spirit, that morning star of evil, fell from heaven, it was as a rebel that he fell. Rebellious angel Lucifer, Satan, who falls to hell after being expelled from heaven. He didn't like playing second banana. Callous, concentrated on evil with stained mind. And soul hungry for rebellion, Dorian Gray hastened on, quickening his step as he went. But as he darted aside into the dim archway that had served him as a shortcut to the ill-famed place where he was going, he felt himself suddenly seized from behind, and before he had time to defend himself, he was thrust back against the wall with a brutal hand round his throat. He struggled madly for life, and by a terrible effort wrenched the tightening fingers away. In a second he heard the click of a revolver and saw the gleam of a polished barrel pointing straight at his head, and the dusky form of a short, thick-set man facing him. "What do you want?" he gasped. "Keep quiet," said the man. "If you stir, I shoot you." "You are mad. What have I done to you?" "Is it James Vane?" "You wrecked the life of Sybil Vane," was the answer. "And Sybil Vane was my sister." "It is." "She killed herself. I know it. Her death is at your door. I swore I would kill you in return. For years I have sought you. I had no clue, no trace. The two people who could have described you were dead. I knew nothing of you but the pet name she used to call you. I heard it tonight by chance. Make your peace with God, for tonight you're going to die." Dorian Gray grew sick with fear. "I never knew her," he stammered. "I never heard of her. You're mad." Again, he's trying to cover his tracks. "You'd better confess your sin, for as sure as I am James Vane, you're going to die." James is trying to make good on his promise. There is a horrible moment. Dorian did not know what to say or do. "Down on your knees," growled the man. "I give you 1 minute to make your grace, to make your peace, no more. I go on board tonight for India, and I must do my job first. 1 minute, that is all." Dorian's arms fell to his side. Paralyzed with terror, he did not know what to do. Suddenly, wild hope flashed across his brain. "Stop!" he cried. "How long ago is it since your sister died? Quick, tell me." 18 years, said the man. "Why do you ask? What do years matter?" 18 years? laughed Dorian Gray with a touch of triumph in his voice. 18 years. Set me under the lamp and look at my face. Dang, it took him that long to track him down. James Vane hesitated for a moment, not understanding what was meant. Then he seized Dorian Gray and dragged him from the archway. Dim and wavering as was the wind-blown light, yet it served to show him the hideous error as it seemed into which he had fallen. For the face of the man he had sought to kill had all the bloom of boyhood, all the unstained purity of youth. The portrait, I believe, is preserving his youth, just as it is bearing the burden of all of his crimes. So too does it bear the passing of time, the toll of time. He seemed little more than a lad of 20 summers, hardly older, if older indeed at all, than his sister had been when they had been parted so many years ago. It was obvious that this was not the man who destroyed her life. He would be like pushing 40 or something like that. He loomed his hold and reeled back. my God, he cried, and I would have murdered you." Dorian Gray drew a long breath. "You've been on the brink of committing a terrible crime, my man," he said, looking at him sternly. "Let this be a warning to you to not take vengeance into your own hands." Yeah, but where's what is it called? Scotland Yard? Like where are those guys? "Forgive me, sir," muttered James Vane. "I was deceived. A chance word I had heard in that damned den set me on the wrong track." "You'd better go home and put that pistol away, or you may get into trouble," said Dorian, turning on his heel and going slowly down the street. James Vane stood on the pavement in horror. He was trembling from head to foot. I actually feel really bad for James Vane. After a little while, a black shadow that had been creeping along the dripping wall moved out into the light and came close to him with stealthy footsteps. He felt a hand laid on his arm and looked around with a start. It was one of the women who had been drinking at the bar. Why didn't you kill him? She hissed out, putting her haggard face quite close to his. I knew you were following him when you rushed out from Dowley's. You fool. You should have killed him. He has lots of money, and he's as bad as bad. It's like you'd be doing London a favor if you killed another wicked rich dude. He's not the man I'm looking for, he exclaimed. And I want no man's money. I want a man's life. The man whose life I want must be nearly 40 now. This one is little more than a boy. Thank God, I have not got his blood upon my hands. The woman gave a bitter laugh. Little more than a boy, she sneered. Why, man, it's nigh on 18 years since Prince Charming made me what I am. What? You lie, cried James Vane. She raised her hand up to heaven. Before God, I am telling the truth, she cried. Before God? Strike me dumb if it ain't so. He's the worst one that comes here. Say he sold himself to the devil for a pretty face. It's nigh on 18 years since I met him. He hasn't changed much since then. I have, though, she added with a sickly leer. You swear this? I swear it. Came in a hoarse echo from her flat mouth. But don't give me away to him, she whined. I'm afraid of him. Let me have some money for my night's lodging. He broke from her with an oath and rushed to the corner of the street, but Dorian Gray had disappeared. When he looked back, the woman had vanished too. It's not really clear who she is. Yeah, it's not clear who she is. But yeah, if there's one person I feel sorry for in this chapter, let's see, what chapter was that? 16? Yeah, if there's one character I feel sorry for in chapter 16, it's James Vane. And then chapter 15, we saw a little bit about Lord Henry's interaction with Dorian. Dorian still trying to cover up some of his misdeeds. And yeah, we'll have to see. Is Dorian going to turn it all around? With only 3 chapters left in the novel? Or will he plunge deeper into the pit? The pit of depravity, or whatever you want to call it. Bad choices. Okay. That was Picture of Dorian Gray tonight. Oscar Wilde. Hope you enjoyed. Mitchell, thank you for the chat. I was going to talk a little bit about Bob Ross, Greed, and whatever the show that I watched. It highlights BRI a little bit more. How Steve didn't really get as much control of the company that his father basically helped build. It's a sad story. You guys can check it out on Netflix. But yeah, Dorian Gray, we're getting close to the end. Tomorrow I think I'll read 2 more chapters, since chapter 17 is very short. I'll probably read 17 and 18 tomorrow, and then 19 and 20 perhaps the next day. So we should be to the end of Picture of Dorian Gray by, I think, Tuesday. So yeah, thank you all for following along. I'm curious to see how the book ends, but we'll have to see. Until next time, Stormer Show signing out. Thank you for watching.